welcome to you. I'm Claire Rayson, as many of you will know, and my company Client Talk is a coaching-powered consultancy. And because of that, there's one theme that comes up again and again, and that theme is collaboration. So whether that be collaboration within teams, whether it be collaboration across teams within firms, whether it be collaboration with clients, it's something that comes up over and over again. So what I wanted to do with today's session was to focus on collaboration, and I started with co-creation with clients, but actually it's going to go a bit broader than that. And as I always do with these things, I like to bring in diverse voices because I like to learn from these sessions as much as I hopefully impart some thoughts as well. So we've got a great lineup today. So I'm just going to say a brief hello to each of them so you can see who they are, and I'll invite them to introduce themselves. They might just want to wave, totally up to them. So I'm going to start off with Steph Wheeler. So Steph is a team coach, someone who I collaborate with, and she's going to talk to us shortly about Lego play, which is very exciting. We also have Natalie Murray. So Natalie is the co-founder of Lawbox, which is a legal design agency. And the reason I brought Natalie along is, again, she's someone that I do a lot with, but also because I think legal design looks at collaboration in quite an interesting way. So I thought we'd get some interesting perspectives from Natalie. And then finally, but not least, we've got Barbara, who's joining us from Brazil. And Barbara is also someone who I collaborate with through the guise of She Breaks the Law. And Barbara is head of innovation at a firm in Brazil. And again, collaboration is a big part of what she does. So I thought she would bring some interesting perspectives too. As I said, it would be great if we can make this interactive. We've got a small number of us online today, so that's great. So hopefully we can achieve that. The way it's going to work, I'm going to give brief introduction, about 5-10 minutes. We're then going to bring in the panelists and we'll chat to those. And then there'll be lots of time for Q&A after that. So if you've got any questions, either store them up, or if you're like me and you forget what time of day it is, and a question pops into your mind, feel free to throw it into the chat and then we'll pick those up afterwards. So that is the plan. And what I want to start to do is think about this kind of spectrum of collaboration that I mentioned. So, as I said, when I started thinking about this session, I wanted to do something around co-creation with clients. It's something I do a lot of client listening that I hear again and again from clients, that they want firms to do more, they want this collaboration. So I thought, okay, well, let's do an event around that. But actually, we did an event, Barbara and I, with She Breaks the Law, talking about innovation and talking about co-creation. And it was a bit of a tester run for this session. And we had some really interesting views come out. And one of the views there was, before we start thinking about co-creation with clients, should we actually take a step back and have a think about collaboration within firms first? Because, I've been, my background is legal, I've been inside law firms, and sometimes, practice teams don't work with each other, they're siloed. There's the them and us, the fee earners, fee burners. So actually, if you're not collaborating internally, how can you expect to collaborate with clients? And go even further, which was where I was also thinking about going in this session, and creating on some of the big stuff. So there are some big themes: diversity, ESG, hybrid working, the future of work, themes where you think, okay, well, those are themes which everyone is facing, everyone's dealing with those themes. Doesn't it make sense to be tackling those themes collaboratively rather than all of us doing it individually? So that was where I wanted to go. But as I said, the session that we did, Barbara, I can't remember them, was that the one that we did on my birthday, maybe even? So in August, as I said, it threw up this thought of, well, actually, do we need to look inside before we start looking outside? Or by looking outside, does that solve the problems inside? So they're the sorts of things that we're going to be discussing today. And what I wanted to do was kind of think about, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So good examples of collaboration. For me, a great example of collaboration is the Mindful Business Charter. And I don't know how many of you have come across it, but the Mindful Business Charter originally was a charter that came about with some banks and their advisory law firms. And it was basically saying, okay, well, we advisors say that we want our lawyers to be fit and well. We banks say that we care about our lawyers' mental health. And actually, we recognise that we've got a role to play here. So if we're dumping a load of work on our lawyers' desks at 10 on a Friday night, the likelihood is that lawyer, or some poor lawyer, is going to be working all weekend, and perhaps that's not going to be so great for their mental health. So the charter is about being mindful about the way that you delegate work. I mean, there are a few other things, but it's basically recognizing that this problem we can't solve on our own. We need to do it together. So that for me is a really good example of collaboration. There are also some great examples of where clients have a number of firms on their panels, and they will say to their panel firms, look, I want you to work together on, for example, legal knowledge sharing, because actually I don't want to receive 10 notifications on GDPR or whatever it might be. I'd quite like you to get together, pool your knowledge, and send me one communication on GDPR, so I can spend 10 minutes reading it rather than spending an hour reading it. And there are lots of examples about that, and I'm going to be touching in with Barbara on some of that and what she's seeing in her firm. And then there are the kind of the multidisciplinary teams. So I think within some city firms, there's a move towards that. And I know not everyone on the line is legal, but I think this applies to all professional services firms, but there's a move towards multidisciplinary. So there's a recognition of diverse teams bring diverse perspectives and bring better solutions for clients. So those for me are kind of the good examples. The bad examples, where perhaps people are trying to collaborate but not doing it very well, are teams where one doesn't know what the other's doing. I mean, anyone who's worked in a professional services firm can probably think of 1,000 examples of bad examples, or as I said, examples of where panel firms aren't coordinating because they want to be the first to get the GDPR email out, and the poor general counsel is absolutely flooded with notifications. And then there's the ugly. So this is where culture doesn't foster collaboration at all. I've talked about lawyers and non-lawyers. I've been on both sides of the fence, and I think that's one where that culture can get in the way of collaboration. So I want to share a couple of thoughts first, as I was kind of pulling this all together, and it's all a bit kind of big picture, I guess, because partly because my daughter's been in hospital, so I've not had time to pull it all together, but partly because I just wanted to sort of share my thinking with you. So the first thought that I wanted to share, that I wanted to touch with the panel was, what do I hear from my clients? And maybe you can reflect on what you hear from your clients. I speak to clients I have been speaking to clients a lot over the past 18 months about D&I, which is obviously something that's on most firms' agendas and most client agendas at the minute. And what I hear again and again is that this is a problem that we're all facing. I'd really like to get some insight from you into how we're tackling this. So, for example, I do a lot of client listening in the property sector. The property sector tends to be heavily male, and it's an industry problem. So actually, it doesn't make sense for different firms to be tackling it individually. It needs to be tackled together. We're busy, we want more collaboration across our providers is something I hear again and again, and we want to see teams working better internally with our providers is something I hear again and again. So collaboration is something that I think clients care about. And then I wanted to share something which I always find fascinating every time I come back to it, and it's what makes teams work, and it's something I'm picking up with Steph in particular. And there's a really interesting study that Margaret Heffernan speaks about a lot. For those that don't know Margaret Heffernan, she's written some fantastic things around willful blindness and groupthink. And she talks about a study which was conducted at MIT. And this study analysed groups to try and work out what made some teams better than others. And what they discovered was that individual intelligence didn't really make a difference. Having a few, so, the 1+1 brilliant people doesn't necessarily make a great team. Having a few brilliant people on the team also wasn't the reason why some teams were doing better than others. What they found was that the groups that were better shared three key things. One was that they gave everyone roughly equal time to speak. And that's something, I know Steph's nodding. I can't see Steve, but I'm sure he's nodding too. So Steve is another team coach that we've got on the call. One of the things that team coaches try to achieve is to give people thumbs up, try and give people equal time to speak. the second was that the individuals were more tuned into one another. So they did studies of kind of empathy, and they found that the teams that were more empathetic did better. And Margaret Heffernan speaks about this, particularly in the context of social capital, which is quite interesting in terms of, particularly thinking about it in the context of today's world where, hybrid working, some in the office, some out of the office, but actually that social capital helps to build some of the social sensitivity in teams, which makes teams perform better. And then the third feature was that these teams had more women on them. So as I was saying before, I make no apologies for the fact today I've got a completely female panel, which wasn't intentional. It was just that I picked the people that I thought would be the best to speak on this topic. But, question whether that was because the team was more diverse, or question whether it's because women tend to be better at when they do empathy tests. So actually, maybe it's a confirmation of the second point around empathy. So really interesting study, and something I want to kind of throw into the room. So the questions that I want to explore today are the following. And as I said, we'll go through around the panel, and then, if you've got questions, finding things interesting, please do share in the chat, because it makes it more interesting for all of us. But the big questions I want to explore today are, there are some big topics where it makes sense to collaborate. ESG, diversity, future of work, is that what we should be doing? What are the ingredients for collaboration? So I've already mentioned some of them. And do those ingredients differ depending on where we are in the spectrum? And then finally, which is something I'm a bit of a magpie, what can we learn from other fields that we can bring in here? Because I think sometimes we look at things with our lens of lawyers or professional services or accountancy, or whatever it might be. So what can we learn from other fields? And that's something I'm going to be talking to Nat about, because legal design is very much about that idea of stealing from other fields. So that is the idea. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see people better. And I'm going to bring Steph in. And the question that I want to start off asking Steph is, well, in fact, I'm going to start with Lego Serious Play, because I think it's something that I always find it, I'm not entirely sure I know what it is. So do you want to explain to everyone what Lego Serious Play is, for those that don't know?
Sure, and I've seen Afshan is here too, who's very experienced Lego Serious Play facilitator. So obviously, please contribute to Afshan if I'm missing something. I'll keep it on a really kind of general level, because we don't have time to go into an awful lot of detail. But in essence, Lego Serious Play is a way of helping people to think differently, to communicate differently, and to solve problems differently. It just like you said you're a magpie, so am I. Why not learn from all these different disciplines? And the kind of Lego Serious Play, the methodology was built on lots of different research knowledge. We know what works, so neuroscience, organizational psychology, group dynamics, and that was put together to develop a framework for facilitating, as I said, thinking, communicating, and problem solving differently. I should add, like coaching, Lego Serious Play can mean all manner of things. And my background is that I was trained by the Association of Master Trainers, and that's the lens through which I see it. So whatever I'm saying comes from that lens. I'm not that familiar with other approaches, because I know there is, as many as there are different coaches. So that's the framework. That's my perspective. I guess to add to that, when we're working with Lego Serious Play, it's a bit like abstract and representational art. We're not trying to build specific models. So you don't have to be super creative and architecturally kind of nuanced. It's not about that. It's about using the bricks to express thoughts, emotions, perceptions. And when you're building them, you're working with a lot of metaphor, a lot of storytelling. By doing that, you're fostering exactly the key elements that you said, which is all about individual time to speak, which is built into the Lego Serious Play methodology. Because one of the founding principles is that rather than having a few voices taking up most of the meeting, Lego Serious Play works. Inbuilt in that is that we are working together to get a solution, and that everybody has equal time. So there's no one expert in the room. We're all experts because we're all the people who've built our model, and you have to listen to my model, because there's no way that you can know what it is unless you listen. And also it's a way, because we can express things through the bricks, we are in a way de-identifying it. We're talking to the model. So I'm not saying I'm scared, which can be quite a vulnerable thing to do in a group. And also we'll have our internal filters. Well, I'm not going to say that because that makes me vulnerable and all this judgment. And you're building a model. You can point to the model and say, this brick represents fear. And now we can talk about something which is in the room, but it's the model. So it's making me less vulnerable. It's making other people connect more. And that fosters understanding. We're seeing each other a little bit human to human. We've got more perspective. We can see things from different perspectives and communicate differently. And just finally, each workshop is bespoke depending on what it is that is being run for. And it's built on a series of questions which lead up to the big question. So at the end, you've got your 3D model, which represents the answer to whatever it is you're working on. And in that workshop, you can, depending how much time you have, you will build individual models, shared models, and then you can build whole systems and connections to the systems. And you can role play how individual reactions, strategies would impact the system. So that's in a nutshell. There's so much to say, but I'll keep it brief.
Thank you. And I'm sure everyone is going to have a lot of questions for you. Now, the next question, and I've got it written down, but actually what I want to do is explain why I'm going to ask this question. So when we were talking before this session, Steph and I were talking, and we were talking a bit about this spectrum. So working internally, and is that different from working externally with clients? And obviously there are different dynamics at play internally where, we've used the lawyer, non-lawyer, fee earner, fee burner, senior, junior. There's all that dynamics at play internally. And then also externally with clients, there's a dynamic. So as advisors to clients, you want to be the ones to be seen to be clever. You want to be seen to be the ones with an answer. So there's a dynamic there, albeit a slightly different one. So do you think, how do you think Lego Play, but I know you team coaching more generally, can help with those different dynamics?
It's such a good question, and we could talk for so long. But again, so overall, again, if we talk for the moment about Lego Serious Play, as I said, there's no expert in the room. So all that kind of the baggage in a way that comes with being an expert, the expectation on you, if you're the lawyer coming into the conversation, the client is there, that can create anxiety because you're used to being the expert, you're expected to have answers. This breaks that. It creates, first of all, a sense of curiosity and generates positive emotions. And we know from positive psychology that those encourage more collaboration, encourage people to be more comfortable in terms of taking risks with one another. So it kind of breaks the dynamic that you would normally have in a group where you have a group of experts and a group of clients. You're coming at it. And again, one of the foundational things of Lego Serious Play is that there is parity. We're all the same. We have equal amounts to contribute. And again, as I said, you have to listen. And one thing that I only heard this morning, so I'm probably going to mangle it up, but there's something called Computational Neuroscience, which I didn't know. The thinking used to be that we make sense of the world because our brain is inundated with so much raw data that we create patterns and that our brain recognizes those patterns. But now a small number of I wrote this down, computational neuroscientists are thinking, actually, that's wrong, because there would just be too much information for us to deal with. So actually what we do, we listen things, we basically listen to hear what we expect to hear. And the only time that stops is when something interrupts that. And then we kind of go, oh, hang on, I wasn't expecting that. Now I really need to listen and look at the raw data that's coming at me. I had a kind of do you know sometimes when there was a mirror on the wall and you kind of brushing your teeth or something, you look up and the mirror is no longer there, but for a split second you see your image on the wall. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. So it's that kind of sense. So if we're going into these meetings and there is pre-existing dynamics there, we're not really listening to what's being said. We are listening to what we think is going to be said. And something like Lego Serious Play, because it interrupts that, because now we have to look, now we have a model to look at, and we need to listen to somebody to explain that model, because otherwise it makes no sense to us. And we know we need to listen because we're going to collaborate in a moment. So I have to know what that red brick is in your model. It means that for the first time, we're actually really listening to what other people are saying, not to what our expectations are of what they're going to say. And that can create a whole different level of collaboration and dynamics. There's more I could say, but I'll stop there. This is
it's fascinating. And you've used my buzzword of listening, and lots of people online will have been on many a session with me on listening. So that don't get me started down that route as well. So I'm going to have one last question, and then we'll go to the other two, and then I know we'll come back. Psychological safety. So I know psychological safety is a term that I think is used quite a lot. People have a sense of what it is. Not everyone has perhaps a full sense of what it is. What is it? And again, I know you've written papers on particularly on Legal Serious Play and how that helps foster psychological safety. So if you could just kind of give us a sense of all of that. A topic that you could probably talk about for hours in a few minutes.
Okay, I'll try and keep it very brief. So the main name in psychological safety is Amy Edmondson. She did the original research and is very much the name in that field. She started looking at it in the context of team learning and development. And what is it in team learning and development that we need to foster that within groups? She was looking at groups of people. And basically she came to the definition that it is a shared belief. I wrote it down because I wanted to get it right. A shared belief amongst individuals as to whether or not it is safe to engage in interpersonal risk-taking in the workplace. So what that means is that when we're operating in teams and works, we are taking, micro decisions, whether or not it's safe for us to react and communicate in certain ways. And what I think is so fascinating because it applies so well to the legal sector. I used to be a lawyer in my previous life, and her earliest research was looking at actually medical teams, which have a really clear hierarchical structure. So she was looking at, for example, in the operating theatre, the surgeon does something, which the junior nurse thinks, I'm not sure that's right. I don't think he read the notes properly. So is there sufficient psychological safety within that team for the nurse to put up her hand and say, look, I'm sorry, consultant, but I think you need to reconsider that again. And that made me think of law firms because, having been the trainee and talking to the more senior partner and all the rest of it. So her research basically said that, the critical component of learning development, and later there was a Google study, which was a longitudinal study, which looked at her work too, which is called Aristotle. It's very easy to find. They were looking at high performing teams, and they were looking across the range of Google and saying, right, what is the secret sauce of high performing teams? And it wasn't all the things I thought it was going to be, like qualifications, makeup of the groups, all the rest of it. It was psychological safety. So can we as a team create an environment where it is safe to take interpersonal risk? And what I mean by interpersonal risk is making myself vulnerable because I might have something to say or something to address, which may not land well with the other people, particularly the more senior people. So that's psychological safety. And I can't remember if there was another element to the question, so can you remind me?
I think the second element to the question was, and I think you've kind of brought that in a little bit, about Lego Serious Play and how because often it's with teams that perhaps don't know each other before you start there. How can you achieve that psychological safety with Lego Play, and is it something that you can achieve quite quickly?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's and Afshan is nodding like that because it's lots of elements because of the way it's processed, because, it works with positive emotion. It works with this, as I said, stories, metaphor, looking at things as an object. So things become a little bit depersonalized. You can look at systems, you can look at the connections. You're seeing different people's perspectives. And the study that we did looking at Lego Serious Play and psychological safety and collaboration, interestingly, it pulled out from the people who took part some of the key components that Amy Edmondson herself says build psychological safety. And they included that often for the first time, the participants were speaking to each other human to human. So they took off their job hats and whatever their roles, or their experts or their junior or their senior. They were actually seeing each other human to human, sometimes for the first time. The whole way the workshops are set up is that it elicits trust. And the third thing was that you are facilitating kind of a very positive language and behavior. And those things are ingrained in Lego Serious Play. They're also ingrained in good team coaching. And as I said, Amy Edmondson herself found in subsequent studies that they were vital components to creating psychological safety.
Thank you. I'm pleased we're doing this after they operated on my daughter. And I should mention, I mentioned Margaret Heaviland, and she also talks about the operating theatre as a really good example of willful blindness. And you know, everyone can see that something's gone wrong, and no one stands up and says anything. So really interesting. I could focus on this all day. Let's bring in Natalie now. If anyone's got questions, as I said, we will be doing questions at the end, but if you've got questions and if you can hold on to them in your head, well done. I can never do that. If you've got questions and you think I don't want to lose the question, please do put them in the chat, because we will have time for questions at the end. So do use that chat function. But now what I want to do is I'm going to change gear a little bit. So we've spoken a little bit about teams, what might make a good team, the ingredients of collaboration. And now I want to bring in Natalie, because Natalie has a legal design agency firm. So it's a law firm with a difference. And what I want to do, again, some people on the line might know what legal design is, others might not. So I'm just going to start off by bringing you in and just inviting you just to let everyone know what legal design is, first of all, and perhaps also kind of from the context of collaboration.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, everyone. And interesting to know that we've got lots of former lawyers in this chat room. Someone is obviously not telling me something I need to know about being a lawyer. But no, legal design and collaboration is a good question, a good concept. So I think there's like three real key things to point out here. So legal design applies human-centered design to the world of law. So it means we actually bring in real life concepts and thoughts and processes to how we as lawyers work. It welcomes collaboration. So that's the main thing I think for this call today, that it actually encourages us to think about what industry, what legal, what accountancy, all of that does to the things that we're doing. And I guess as legal designers or people doing what I'm trying to do, we try to use our efforts, our work and practice to engage in better and more user-friendly legal documents. I guess they're the interface between us and our clients and their end users. So we try to kind of broaden those, make them easier to use, and you know, controversially into things that people actually want to read. So yeah, I think that's kind of, there's three main things to it.
I'm going to switch up the questions. I've given all my panelists questions and I'm going completely off piste, so I'm not being very fair to any of them. But they all know me, so hopefully they'll still talk to me afterwards. One of the things I wanted to pick on first was that one of the things that's really struck me working with you and kind of immersing myself in the whole kind of legal design movement is that there's a real desire not only to collaborate in terms of bringing teams together for clients that work, but like you said, the industry aspect and people being very open if they work in legal design to share knowledge, to share thoughts, to share, you know, what they're doing. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because, you know, I've kind of put down, I think you just get it. So
yeah, and it's odd actually to say this, but having worked in industry, in the legal industry for so many years, there was a real attempt to try not to share best practices, to share, you know, ideas and things between firms. And when I started to talk about legal design, there were so many people that got in touch with me to say, oh, look, let's just have a chat. And I was really kind of astounded by how many people were just sharing kind of what I would ordinarily consider trade secrets, like these things that they've created with me, and having met me once or twice before, because I think there's just a general movement that we could be doing things better. And it doesn't matter between us who does that first or how it's done. It's that we are all working together to the same purpose. So yeah, there are elements of this across other industries, but having come from a very traditional legal background, it very much surprised me that lots of legal designers out there will just share some things because it's better for everybody.
And I want to tie that kind of notion of collaboration. So for those that have signed up to this thinking, gosh, this was about co-creation with clients, we're not talking very much about co-creation with clients. I want to bring that in now, because we've spoken a bit about kind of what collaboration looks like. We've spoken about collaboration a bit with people across the industry, and I'm going to be talking about that in a bit more detail with Barbara. But how do you give some examples perhaps of where you're collaborating with your clients, or where you're getting your clients together to collaborate?
Yeah, so I think Steph actually touched on this and sort of laid the foundations for, I was kind of nodding away as you were talking, Steph. So I think lawyers come into meetings with like this impression that we already know the questions we're going to ask. We sort of already have an idea about what the answers are going to be. And our clients actually come to those meetings, as Steph touched upon, we're the experts. So we can just kind of get on and get the legal documents done. The approach that we take through legal design is that we both come to the table as equals. And I say both, but whoever's in the room. So we get the people that are better to do the job into the room to do the job properly. And we all come in as equals with a fair, equal vote or say on what we're doing. And so I always say to clients, and it has taken time to get clients to understand this, but they know their business is better than we do. So they come to the table with the knowledge of what their business does, how their practices work, and we come with the supporting legal knowledge to be able to create the end result, the product that we're supposed to create. So it's not easy, because I think everybody sort of sees the lawyer and just expects us to run the call, but actually we turn that around and it's more focused on listening, as you said, Steph. Claire, I know you say this a lot, but we just listen with a kind of, it takes a while, but an open mind. Like I'm not expecting the answers that come. I'm listening to them and adapting what we do based on those. I think the lockdown was tough because ordinarily we would go into a room, it would be a really comfortable setting with a cup of coffee, less, no suits, nothing formal at all. And then we had lockdown, which turned everything kind of to screens. But I think in some ways that helped a lot, because all of a sudden we were working with people who had their children in the background. We were working with people who were in their front rooms or kitchens, and their homes were opened up to us, as was mine to them. And it naturally broke down those barriers. And, now with the clients that I work with ordinarily, they will just pick up the phone or we'll just have a quick FaceTime call to talk about their, certain issues. And they're much more relaxed with how we deal with things.
And it's interesting because Steffi mentioned that kind of human to human. And actually, I think that's one of the things that, we need to work out how we can hold on to that when we go back into the, no one's saying new normal, are they anymore? Whatever it's supposed to be, normal, post-pandemic, I don't know. Anyway, I think that human to human thing is something that we definitely need to hold on to. One of the things that I know that Lawbox does is it creates boxes, so spaces where different types of stakeholders can collaborate. So I know one of them is the compliance box. So would you want to talk a little bit about that as a way that you're using the philosophy of legal design to bring clients together to collaborate?
Yeah, so as a regulatory lawyer and in-house lawyer, at certain times in my career, I recognised the fact that actually I was on my own with lots of this stuff. So we'd have a big, piece of legislation coming through, and we think, well, how are we going to adapt and change and meet the business needs in bringing this in? And what we've done actually is we've created a compliance box, and we've got a bunch of, in-house counsels that come and we talk about certain things that are coming up. So it might be, the new cookie policy requirements or something that's kind of out there and I know everybody's thinking about. And actually we just get into a room a little like this and we brainstorm the issues. And again, it was a difficult concept because I wondered how protective everybody would be about things. But it's funny that you don't have to share trade secrets or company information to be able to actually collaborate together and come up with some really good, action plans for how we can go forward with certain issues. And I think by collaborating and sharing ideas in that way, you kind of, there's certain things that I thought, oh, I hadn't thought about that, or well, that's a good idea. And I take those away with me. And then I'm able to do a better job for my clients. And I know from feedback that everybody does the same. And again, it's a really relaxed environment. We, everybody has an equal say, and it doesn't really matter who talks or if someone talks a little more than others. Everybody kind of gets time to put their voice forward.
Thanks. And, I sit in on some of the compliance boxes, and it's interesting because Barbara, who I'll be bringing in a minute, we do virtual coffees for She Breaks the Law. And again, the idea is very much that everyone has their own time to speak. And I think, it's one of the things, with team coaches, you kind of know, and that, actually when you're on the receiving end of it, it's really powerful. And like you say, sometimes I'm a natural talker. So, I sometimes need to put myself on mute or have my sticky, which for those that have ever done any kind of listening training with me, I have a great acronym, which is WAIT, which is why am I talking? So I have that always stuck on my thing. But it's a really nice way of when you're listening to clients or listening to other people that, and as you say, it's that perspective that actually I hadn't thought of it in that way, or I didn't realize that someone would take it in that way. That's really powerful. I'm going to bring in Barbara, and then we'll all come back together, and hopefully there'll be lots of questions for everyone. But thank you for now. And Barbara, I am going to start off. And again, I'm mixing up the questions, but they're questions you're expecting, hopefully in a different order. But with the point that Natalie made around the tension between sharing trade secrets and being competitive, versus, well, actually, there are things that we could be collaborating on, like diversity, like ESG, where, is that really a competitive advantage? So how do you see all that come out into play?
Okay, so first of all, most of you here are former lawyers or lawyers in another life, but I'm still a lawyer and I'm from Brazil. But I like to say that I am a recovering attorney because I've been tackling other skills and managing other skills that are not usually performed by lawyers. And it was something that I never felt like I was never fitting in the lawyer actual, what a lawyer should be, like telling people how to do things and knowing it all. And I never felt comfortable with that. So I'm pretty much happier now that I found there are other possible career paths for people that have a lawyer background. So one thing that I noticed, and I've been working, so I'm from Brazil. I work I'm a head of knowledge management and innovation at a law firm in the northeast of Brazil. So we have 400 lawyers, about 900 people in total. And we work with banking, telecom. So we attend a lot of big clients here in Brazil. So we only operate in Brazil. And one thing that I felt here, and I've been working there for the past 16 years. So since I was in law school, I worked there as an intern, and I ended up keeping my career there. And I'm very happy working there with different responsibilities over the time. And one thing that I noticed working there and attending conferences and even collaborating with other clients or other law firms to attend clients is that law firms usually don't talk to one another because they don't want to share trade secrets. And even when they talk to one another, they are usually trying to find ways to keep advantage over the other ones. Like, oh, maybe I should hire someone from that firm because that firm is doing something different. So I would kind of bring people from there or even from the client. So they want to hire other professionals to kind of compete and do things that other ones are doing, but they prefer doing that instead of talking to each other. But they're usually not well equipped to absorb the knowledge that people come from other cultures, from other firms, and do the same thing. So, and then I started attending conferences and I found out about ILTA, it's the International Legal Technology Association, where people talk and share like, not trade secrets, but, they share like with deep details about what they do and how they went to that conclusion on things. And I even started talking about things that I was doing at my firm, because since we don't have other firms to talk to and to compare what we're doing, we kind of ended up doing things without knowing names. So I ended up starting this career in knowledge management when I didn't even know knowledge management existed, but we were doing knowledge management initiatives. And when I found out there were other people in the world like doing the same things or thinking alike, and we started talking to each other, it was really good. Like they were saying, like listening, even speaking about things that I took for granted the way we did was kind of something special, and maybe we could focus more on that. So instead of making competition, or it was good to drive efficiencies, to rethink processes, So, and then when we started doing things different at my firm, other firms came by to ask for advice. And then we did it, we talked. And each time we said the way we thought of things and the way we created different roles and, how we attended a specific client. The other firm did not do the same thing or didn't do better or whatever. Maybe they didn't even do what we were doing. They just wanted to know out of curiosity. But it wasn't a waste of time for us to share because we were more aware of what we were doing. So it's really good to collaborate and talk to one another and to bring attention when we have moments like this one. We bring attention to other people that don't know things exist, that don't know it's possible to engage and to collaborate. And then we have more people in legal to think differently and to be more open to sharing, more vulnerable, more, and we'll drive diversity, we'll drive inclusion. So it's a win-win for collaborating with other firms, with clients. I don't think it's, at least in my jurisdiction, as a thing, like people don't do that very often. It's like when you go to conferences, when you go to some sessions, it's like a press release, like, oh, we're great at this. We did a major change inside our firm, but they don't say how. They don't share war stories. And when we share war stories, people say, oh, they recognize themselves in the stories and they see that it's possible. Like Claire was saying that she's having a problem with her kid, it's in the hospital and things are happening. Oh, I resonate with that. I have 2 kids and my kids got sick. And then we even be more open to sharing in perspectives, but like people to people, person to person. It's not like law firm or clients. We are all people in the end. And so I hope we do it more often. I love collaboration. I love sharing and I love talking. I talk too much sometimes, even in English, it's not my mother tongue. It's not and I'm not very used to it, but it's good to share ideas and to discuss.
Thank you. And one of the things I love chatting about you, I've lost my ability to speak English. One of the things I love when I talk to you is around innovation, because I think sometimes when we think about innovation, we think about big changes or, and a bit like I did with this topic today, I wanted to think about co-creating with clients. I really came to the topic, I think, initially thinking, particularly around diversity, which is something that I'm quite passionate about, where, lots of us on the call have had individual conversations about it. I'm, passionately believe that team coaching has got a massive role to play with diversity. But what I love about when I speak to you around innovation is, sometimes it's small steps and those small steps add up. And, I think there's a thing going around LinkedIn at the moment, which is a great big, one step, and all of a sudden you look back and you see where you've come. You shared a really nice story with me, which I'd like you to share with people online around how you got lawyers to engage with tech. Maybe you could share that with people today.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the consequences of the pandemic is that now clients want answers all the time, and they don't care if you're like with your kids or you're not in front of a computer. They want the law firm to answer, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. People don't know how to operate in this crazy, ever-changing environment. So clients were very demanding. And lawyers, a common challenge faced by law firms internally is that law firms don't talk to each other, but internally lawyers don't talk to each other. It's very difficult to convince, especially those high-powered experts to collaborate with other lawyers. No, I'm the best lawyer because I know more. I know more how to attend a client. If I teach another lawyer to do the same thing I do, I'm gonna be out of the firm. I'm gonna be, and but there's only so much you can do as an individual, and we can't press. So clients want more, and I can't squeeze additional productivity in a specific lawyer. And we can make them work harder or longer, especially in the pandemic where everything is crazy and we're going through a lot of things. And so only by truly collaborating that we can together tackle and address issues that anyone individually could. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I listened to a podcast with, if I recall, Greg Lambert and Patrick DiDomenico. And Patrick was saying that if necessity is mother of invention, crisis is the father of innovation. So we have lawyers that don't want to collaborate, they don't want to share their secrets, and they are skeptical, but they were facing problems to attend the client. So what we did at the firm, and our firm is a kind of very innovative firm in terms of we have project managers, we have data analysts, but innovation was kind of a staff job. Like lawyers demanded new technology or new processes or whatever, and they knew they could get the help, but it was not something that they would do by themselves. So what we did was we had a call for ideas and say, okay, what problems are you facing that we might want to address? And a common problem that we had was a problem of communication. People were having information coming from WhatsApp and email and whatever and Teams and they didn't want to know, and they didn't know how to tackle all this information to answer the client, because if I was attending a client and I wasn't available at the time, the other lawyer would have to somehow figure out how to do and ask the client the same questions because the information was not in the same place. And so I have a team. I have the team of data analysts and legal operations and data and process management. We all use MS Teams. We all have our information together for the team, but for lawyers, it was not the same. And when the lawyers were saying they had a problem with communication and they wanted information, we knew the answer. We say, okay, we can use MS Teams, we can organize, put everything in one place and whatever. But if we told the answer and they would be skeptical, as they are, it would not happen. It would not happen. So when we figured out the problem, we said, okay, now you're gonna find out by yourself how to answer, how to address this problem. We're gonna give you a product manager to help you and to take notes and to schedule calls, but this is gonna be your job. You're going to interview other lawyers and see how you're going to make it happen. So we asked someone from outside to help and teach some business skills so they could address like design thinking and like help them, because lawyers were not prepared to do this like out of the blue. And in the end of the project, they developed with a small group of lawyers the better usage of MS Teams, but out of their necessity, out of the crisis that they were facing. So when they did that, they didn't even do like half, they didn't use MS Teams like half of what we do with step areas, like with the IT people, and the HR even uses better than the lawyers. But now they saw it's possible, and they got the idea by themselves by collaborating among lawyers. So it was a good thing, and now we're implementing with other teams, but it's not something that the law firm is making them use or saying they have to. It's something that they found interesting, and they're going to advocate for it with other lawyers. So it's going to be a lawyer talking to other lawyers. They're going to help IT develop it better. And they became more, it drove empathy on the process of finding solutions. Not sometimes, okay, I want this, install that, push, press this button and everything's going to be solved. It's so much harder than that. So it was good to make them like change the way they think. And it's going to be a good start. It's not something that's not collaboration and innovation. It's not a one man or a one area job. It has to be in the culture. So we have to drive this culture of collaboration and innovation everywhere, not only to demand things, but to think of solutions as well. Because if I only have one person to tackle the problem, it's going to be harder and going to take more time to solve some major issues.
Thank you. I think that's such a lovely example for so many reasons, and kind of a few reflections before we start to invite questions from the floor. So whilst I'm summing up, those in the room have a think about any questions you might have. But I love where we started, where you were saying that even if you share, the culture that you bring those ideas back to is different, and some ideas won't land with that same culture. Some ideas won't be implementable, if that's a word, because of the culture, and some cultures will be closed off to it. Some cultures will take those ideas and run with them and go, somewhere else. So that I think is a really powerful message. And also I love where you said that, there's only so much you can do as an individual. And I think that that really is the key to what we're saying today. There's only so much that you can do. And, you know, thinking about the spectrum that I shared at the beginning, there's only so much you can do, you know, whether that be within your teams, within your firm, with clients, where you're, you know, you're not looking at bringing other people in. So thank you. We've all spoke, as I knew we would, we've all taken up more time than I had allotted, but that's fine. But we've now got time for questions. So has anyone got any questions from the floor? Maybe we'll kick off with Steve. I know Steve always has a question. And he's got his hand up too.
I've put my hand out and I've just dropped you something in the chat as well, Claire. So yes, I do have a question. My question is around successes that you've had in dealing with people who are resistant to this. So not everybody will have the same feeling of psychological safety when they're going into, let's say, a Lego play event. Some people will be cynical. Some people will simply be nervous and anxious and concerned about the consequences of collaboration or the limits of collaboration. So how do you convince people to engage? What's worked for you?
Is that directed at Steph? You mentioned Lego.
No, it's directed at everybody.
At everyone. Steph, do you want to answer? And then if anyone else has got anything to jump in with.
Just quickly, and also, yeah, Steve, I know you're a fantastic team coach, so you'll also have input, and Afshan too, from your experience from Legal Serious Play. I think it's a really, really good point. I think also when you're creating psychological safety in that team is going back out into a system. But equally, psychological safety is measured on a team-by-team basis. So I think if you can increase it in that team, it'll take that with it outside into the bigger system as well. Absolutely, everybody comes from a different perspective. And part of the Lego Serious Play process, again, from the Association of Master Trainers, is that you don't just jump into it. So there is a process by which you spend the first hour, sometimes longer, building a kind of it's called skills building. So people relax in terms of the actual what they're supposed to be doing. So that fear and anxiety goes away. And you can develop exercises, and you don't do it out of the blue. So you'll have a conversation with whoever your contact is first to get a feeling of how the team is operating. Is there anything I need to know? Are there certain individuals? So you tailor the builds and the questions to the people in the room. And some teams have fantastic psychological safety from the start, so you don't have to take it. Others not. So you recognize that you're starting from a different place. And I think kind of, you know, Afshan will have heard this too. There are some stories of people will just walk out and say, it's not for me. You know, obviously as an individual, that's a little bit upsetting because you want everybody to be happy. But equally, you know, if you take a step back and look at the team dynamics and you think, well, isn't that interesting? So here is a person who wasn't willing to engage, who wasn't feeling safe, who wasn't willing to, you know, so what does that tell us as a team as a whole? And, you know, so it's not a magic bullet. You're not going to sort it out in that team workshop, probably. But it gives you information you can then work with individuals and with teams. And does that?
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you.
And I think to add a perspective from kind of within firms, and I think Barbara, you can perhaps add to this as well. And I think, you know, the example that you gave there is a good one in terms of, you know, and it was almost a coaching element to the way that you were handling that. But, you know, in terms of getting buy-in internally, to think about, you know, asking people to start to look at it from a different perspective, asking people to start to own, you know, the solution as well as the problem, I think is a really nice way to go about it.
Yeah, you know, I would add some things like if it's for the partners or for directors of the company, of the firm, or whatever. I recently read a book called Smart Collaboration. So collaboration is something that must be done right and purposefully. So if you want people in your team to collaborate, it's something I say, stop hiring jerks. Stop hiring people that will take collaboration out. So if you want to have people to collaborate, how are you gonna reward people for the job they're doing? So if you reward more people that are collaborative and help each other, it's gonna tell a message. So it's what's the message you're giving to your team. So, okay, we are a very collaborative firm, we do whatever, but I only reward that jerk that is the rainmaker that goes by herself or by himself to the client. I can drive it. And people will say, okay, you're just saying it, you're not doing it. So you have to do it, and you have to have the top executives of the company, of the firm, to tell the message and to collaborate as well. So if you don't do that, it's going to be expensive. You can pay for as many coaches, and you can have Legal Serious Play, and you can hire Stephanie, but it's not going to happen if you don't have the internal resources, the mindset to make it happen.
Thanks. I think that's a really nice point in terms of what do we reward within firms, and you know, do we reward that being part of a team, or do we reward the individual? And actually, I read an interesting article this morning about from Harvard. I always kind of mention Harvard Business Review, but they just have some great pieces, but one around, you know, firms and organizations more broadly than just professional services not rewarding the B players. So there's such a focus on the A players that actually people downplay the B players, who are the ones who actually in a crisis are probably going to be the ones that really make sure that their colleagues looked after, that really make sure that things happen, as opposed to perhaps the ones, I mean, law firms will have their rainmakers that run off, you know, and actually reassessing what you're valuing in a team. Thanks. Thanks, Steve, sharing the link to the book. Anyone else got any questions? Or indeed panelists, you might have questions of other panelists, feel free to.
I don't. This is hi, Afshan. I don't have a question so much, but it is something that, and everyone's picked up on this, and maybe if I just make the statement, it might encourage a question. I'm not sure, or some other discussion, but something, Claire, you said a while back, which was about learning from different disciplines, and you've reminded me that back in the day, like way back in the day, when I was still working in education, getting science teachers to talk to art teachers, business lecturers to talk to construction, and it was bizarre, but after some time they really created some amazing things, and why I haven't brought that lesson into my area of work. And I just wonder if anyone here on this call today, have you actively sought out a completely different area, industry perhaps, to add a different perspective to the problems that you're solving?
Yeah, I can speak to that. It was something that I even talked to Claire about. It's like legal professionals, they maybe, we can say we live in a bubble, because you only talk to lawyers when you only have this kind of perspective. And legal professionals, we are being paid to be inefficient as an industry, paying by the hour, paying to take longer to solve problems. And and our clients are not in legal. Our clients are in other industries. I attend banking, telecom, retail. So they have it as an industry, as a client, they have a different perspective. And so one of the things that that made me transition to KM was that when visiting clients, I knew that the practice of law itself was not enough. They had business problems, so we had to address with different ways. So this made me kind of seek knowledge in other areas. So in compliance, it's related to legal, but it's not only legal. Compliance, governance, and I even ended up doing an MBA where I was the only lawyer in the group of the students in the class. So they would make me realize how stupid some things in legal were. So why don't you talk to your clients? No, because I have to know it all. As a lawyer, I have to know all the answers. No, sometimes you ask your client, what do you want? Or the way I'm doing is better. Sometimes it's just a spreadsheet that you're filing and you're filling, and you put a dot and it's making their life miserable, and you don't see it. So listening, asking questions makes a whole lot of difference. So yes, and one thing that was really bizarre is that, so I'm from Brazil, I speak Portuguese, and when I went to law school, my friends and family and whatever said, no, English is not the perfect language for you to study, because in UK and the US, they have common law, and in Brazil, it's civil law. So they're the only focus in the law itself. So I can't study English because legal is different, and I can't apply my legal knowledge in the US and the UK. And then they should study French or Italian or German. And then by learning English, open perspective to other jurisdictions, not only other industries, but other countries. So here in Brazil, we have a vast legal system that people are not aware of. We have more than 1 million lawyers. We have more than 80 million ongoing cases in the justice system. We have only electronic processes now. So it's other countries take it for granted. And sometimes you have, when you share it with other industries and other jurisdictions, other countries, other areas, it's going to be different perspectives and diversity and drive other solutions that do not require reinventing the wheel. Sometimes did the wheel, it's just not out of your sight.
Thank you. I always love your passion. And I think, that's one of the lovely things for me over this kind of again, what are we in now, new normal, whatever. But what's been the lovely thing is being able to connect across, I've been on calls where I've been the only person from the UK, and you see things from a completely different perspective, whether it's been in the same industry or a different industry, and really powerful. I'm conscious of the time. We have slightly overrun. I don't have to run off anywhere. I do have to go back to the hospital, but it's been such a lovely break for me being on this call and talking about something so positive. I want to thank all of the speakers. I think we've had some really lovely reflections going back to try and remind myself of my initial questions that I wanted to touch on today. Thinking about, the big topics. Does it make sense to collaborate? We haven't really spoken about that, but for me, it absolutely does. And, how do we get there? We've spoken a lot about the different ingredients for collaboration, and hopefully those on the call can take those back to whatever context it is where collaboration is important for you. And what can we learn from other fields that we can bring in here? I mean, I've purposely brought in people with completely different takes on this, which has been fascinating for me, as I knew it would be. But where else can you go to bring some insight into your collaborative efforts, and where are you going to go with them? So thank you to Steph, thank you to Barbara, thank you to Natalie, thank you for everyone who joined us today. As I said, I don't have to run off, so if anyone has any questions and they want to stay on for a few minutes, then feel free. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your days, and thanks for joining us.